Welcome to Healthitarian Living. In this video, I will be sharing with you what I consider one of the most important resources for easy, optimally healthy, whole food, plant-based eating. This being the 5-step STAR meal template. If you are already familiar with my work and videos, the way that I teach people to eat optimally healthy is more so through meal templates rather than singular recipes. As wonderful as recipes can be to motivate us, inspire us to try new things and to have some kind of a, idea of what the final product will be like or exactly what to put together, they only come in handy up to a point. As for everyday, quick, easy, practical meal preparation, you don't want to be worried whether you have all the right ingredients or how complex the process may be. You want quick, you want easy. This is what will make it super practical, but at the same time, you want optimally healthy, real, whole plant food. This is where I have found over the last 10 years of living and teaching all about whole food, plant-based eating, and optimally healthy nutrition for human needs, that meal templates truly are invaluable. They are extraordinary, in fact, because as long as you buy the right foods at the grocery store, and that doesn't mean specific foods, that just means the right foods, a bunch of different whole plant foods, some fruits, some vegetables, make sure you have some dried beans, grains on hand, some nuts, seeds, herbs and spices, then you can create meals in what I consider really minutes, about 15 minutes on average, outstanding meals that can be so satisfying, not just flavor-wise and variety-wise, but again, when it comes to optimal health, nutrition, protection, prevention, and healing for outstanding results, not just for you today, but as a great investment for your future health. And so this meal template is called the STAR meal template. And I will share with you first why and where this name came from. For starters, STAR meals because these meals are going to be based on starch-rich foods. This means foods that are composed of complex glucose packets, with glucose being the optimal fuel for the human body. Secondly, I chose to call them STAR meals because these meals truly are superstars in their own right, in that they provide us easily with optimal nutrition composition for our human needs, where about 70 to 80% of the calories come from carbohydrates, about 10 to 15% from protein, and about 10 to 15% from fat. On top of this, they offer the highest nutrient density. Because they are composed of whole plant foods, they also offer us some of the best and highest amounts of whole food vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, and of course, fiber. And so at the beginning, when I was first working with these and experimenting with them myself in my own life, I thought, let's call them vegetable medleys or something like that, but nothing seemed to stick or work. And this is where eventually STAR meals came to mind as a quick and easy way to remember and understand what these meals are all about. Next, let's go through the 5-step process of how to create these STAR meals. In that, you will get an infinite amount of meal combinations for optimal variety and uniqueness and flavor and color and texture variation so that you never get tired of eating the same thing over and over, while at the same time always eating from the right foundation of foods. Here we go. Step 1. Pick a starchy vegetable or grain. When it comes to starchy vegetables, this means foods like potatoes, yams or sweet potatoes, cassava, also called or known as yuca, as well as winter squashes like butternut, buttercup, acorn, spaghetti, and pumpkin. When it comes to grains, here's a list of potential options. Rice, this means real whole rice such as brown rice, black rice, even red rice, as well as wild rice. Quinoa, this includes white and red and other quinoa varieties. Buckwheat, preferably the raw, not the roasted kind. Millet, amaranth, and sorghum. All of these grains are naturally gluten-free and allow you to also make these STAR meals gluten-free without going to any processed gluten-free foods. Other grains, if you don't mind eating gluten, include wheat berries, spelt berries, rye berries. This means these grains in their most natural, wholesome forms. Bulgur, frike, as well as barley. Now, each of these grains you'll notice is italicized as these grains do contain gluten. Now you might be thinking, what about corn? Now corn is sometimes considered a grain, sometimes considered a vegetable, and indeed you can definitely use corn. That is if you can find it in its organic form, fresh or frozen, not canned. And organic because corn is one of the most common genetically modified foods today. What about couscous? Well, couscous could be okay the odd time. However, do note that it is a step closer to being a processed grain. And so if you do use couscous, I recommend it from the whole brown version of couscous, not the white, more refined and processed version of couscous. Finally, what about pasta? Again, pasta is a few steps down from being a real whole grain. This means that some refining and definitely processing took place. If you do choose to use any pasta here, for optimal health recommendations, always choose the whole grain variety, preferably organic, and the odd time rather than a regular inclusion in your diet. Next, step 2. Pick a mushroom. This step is completely optional. While mushrooms are not plant foods, they are highly nutritious, highly healing and protective foods. Very medicinal foods that offer us an array of spectacular benefits, both when it comes to the macronutrients and the micronutrients. So if you choose to pick a mushroom as part of your star meal, here's a few examples. You can choose from white button mushrooms, brown button, portobello or portobella mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, and other similar Asian mushrooms such as maitake. You can also pick oyster mushrooms, as well as any other edible varieties of mushrooms that you may be comfortable with or can easily get in your area. Next, step 3, one of the most critical steps of the star meal template. Pick 2 to 4 vegetables, and 2 to 4 why? You can pick one and you can definitely pick more than 4. But simplicity and ease is the key here, as well as when we think of optimal digestion, our bodies don't necessarily want or love digesting 15 different ingredients. So keeping it simple actually goes a long way. It makes your life easier in terms of how much and what you have to prepare, and it actually optimizes your digestion. So the 2 to 4 is just a rough ballpark figure to, again, give you a good guideline. Options here for vegetables to pick from are broccoli, cauliflower, bell peppers, eggplant, carrots, beets, onions of any kind, asparagus, kale, Brussels sprout, cabbage of any kind, zucchini, string beans, and peas. Now you will notice that the string beans and peas are and can be considered more of a bean or a legume. However, in their fresh forms, they're often considered actually as part of vegetables. And so as we'll mention in a moment, you can use them as a vegetable and or a bean. Next, step 4, add a bean. This step is completely optional. Typically, I recommend reserving or saving your bean portion of the day for your wholemeal salad. And you can find the wholemeal salad template in another video where I teach you how to make optimally healthy wholemeal salads as one of your main daily meals, where you would be including beans typically. Now, if you want to have beans as part of 2 of your meals that day, that's fine. But again, it's not necessary. And so if you're having beans with one meal, you don't necessarily need to have them with another meal that day. And simplicity for optimal digestion, again, is and tends to work much better. So what kinds of beans could you be using? Well, first, fresh beans as vegetables, as we just finished talking about with the vegetable examples of green beans and peas. You can also use dry beans, of course, cooking them. Any beans here will do, such as chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils, pinto beans, anything that you enjoy or can easily find. You can also include here a type of homemade bean patty, or sometimes called a bean burger. You can also include organic tempeh or some organic tofu. And I specify and emphasize here organic, as just like corn, soy tends to be today one of the top genetically modified foods unless it is in its organic form. And finally, step 5, add a creamy nut or seed sauce. For this step, I've already shared with you in a previous video a sauce template of how to make your own homemade, whole food, vegan, oil-free, gluten-free, and sugar-free sauces. Amazing creamy sauces that will add all the variety of flavors, even colors, to these meals. So that even if, let's say, you were to eat potatoes, broccoli, and kale over and over, you can diversify that meal alone with the different sauces you're going to make. And so check out that video if you haven't already for how to diversify your star meals with the optimal creamy sauces. So that's it. Here are the 5 steps as a summary again. Step 1, we are working with picking a starchy vegetable or grain. Step 2, which is optional, picking a mushroom. Step 3, picking 2 to 4 vegetables. Step 4, adding a potential optional bean. And step 5, adding a creamy nut or seed sauce. I've bolded step 1, 3, and 5 to emphasize for you that these should be your most important steps. You should always focus on making sure that you satisfy these steps optimally. That means make sure also that your plate is full of vegetables, even more so at times than the starchy vegetable or grains. This will highly depend on your lifestyle and health needs. Step 5 could be optional as well, as you could dress your star meal in many other ways, just with simple herbs and spices. However, usually this is what's going to make these star meals so highly enjoyable, or that much more enjoyable, aside from how delicious and wonderful our starchy vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, grains, mushrooms, and beans already are. And so working with these 5 easy steps, you can put together, again, an infinite amount of different meal combinations that are quick and easy. How quick? On average, 15 minutes is all it will take to prepare one of these star meals for about 2 people. For your starchy vegetables, if you're using them, they take on average 10 to 15 minutes to cook. And when it comes to cooking these vegetables, you want to cook in the least invasive of ways, or least harmful of ways. This is where some steaming or gentle cooking will do. Gentle cooking that uses minimal water. We don't want to brown or roast these types of foods in any way, as that actually introduces all sorts of stressors for our body. So keeping their natural color is always a good clue to go by, that what cooking method is going to maintain as much of its natural texture, color, and flavor as possible. You can also make these meals within 15 minutes if you have pre-cooked or batch cooked your grains. Otherwise, if you are starting fresh from a dry grain, then you do need to expect that that dry grain, depending on which one it is going to cook in about, on average, 20 to 45 minutes. If you do apply batch cooking, which I talk about in a different video, then you only need to do this really once a week, and then just scoop it onto a plate, add your vegetables, which gently cooked or steamed will take on average 5 minutes, and your sauce about 5 minutes to prepare. And that's it, you are done. When it comes to the cooking steps, you always want to start with the longest cooking item first. So if you are cooking a dry grain from start, then this would be where you would begin. And then you wouldn't necessarily need to start cooking your vegetables or mushrooms until the last 10 minutes or so of the grain cooking time. If you are starting with a starchy vegetable, then you would start cooking those. If you are including mushrooms, they should be the next thing you focus on cooking, as mushrooms also typically take about 10 minutes on medium heat with the lid covered. Next, you would go to your vegetables, always starting from cooking the ones that take the longest first, and then adding in the ones that are more sensitive and don't require as much time as you go. Think always 2 to 5 to maximum 10 minutes. Something like raw cauliflower on a little thin layer of water may need up to 10 minutes to steam, but something like kale literally needs a minute to 2, or even putting it on top of, let's say you're already cooking your mushrooms, just adding it to the last minute. And ultimately, to make this process so quick, so easy and efficient, don't wait to start cooking until you cut everything up. Rather, start with the first thing, like let's say peeling your potatoes, cutting them up and starting them to boil. And then while they start cooking, you start working with your mushrooms. Get them to start cooking, and then you start chopping up, let's say, your broccoli or your kale, etc. Then add those. Once you've got all that chopped up, work on your sauce. And then by the time everything is finished cooking, you're just putting it all together. So next, let's take a look at some examples of what would these star meals look like, just to give you some ideas and start getting your creative juices, motivation, and inspiration flowing. Our first example shows you a star meal made of red quinoa, cauliflower, and peas, and dressed with some cashew sauce. Example 2 shows you a star meal composed of brown rice, some brown button mushrooms, some kale, as well as some broccoli, and a cashew sauce. Example 3 shows you a star meal made of potatoes, broccoli, edamame, as well as tahini sauce. Example 4 shows you a star meal composed of black rice and plain frozen vegetables. And then finally, this meal is dressed with some peanut sauce. And so often you will find it will be very helpful to have some frozen vegetables on hand aside from fresh ones, because there might be a stressful time in your life. You may have not had a chance to go grocery shopping or something along the way, where you can always depend that in your freezer you can find some frozen vegetables and or mushrooms of some kind. Example 5 is a little different, just to show you how much variety you can bring into these star meals. It is based on butternut squash as our starchy vegetable. It includes some green beans. It also includes some organic tofu and a different type of sauce other than the creamy nut or seed sauce, this one being a homemade cranberry and date sauce. Example 6 is based on brown rice. Here we're using some wild lobster mushrooms. We're using some broccoli and eggplants, all dressed in a creamy coconut sauce. Example 7 is a star meal that is much more simple. And I wanted to show you that sometimes you may not want to make a sauce, for example, but just the simplicity and goodness of whole plant foods are wonderful pretty much on their own. And so this is an example of some cooked cassava, as well as zucchini, carrots, and tomatoes. And you can keep some of these vegetables raw if you prefer, or gently cook them. However, what many people find for optimal digestion that works best is to keep mostly cooked food together and mostly raw food together. So this is where your wholemeal salads can introduce more of the raw food component into your diet, and these star meals can introduce some of the cooked, gently cooked component that is into your diet. Example 8 is a star meal that includes some corn. Chop up some brown button mushrooms, start cooking them for about 10 minutes, add into the last 5 minutes your green beans, and then to the last 2 minutes your red peppers, and within 10 minutes you have this wonderful medley ready, and then this combination includes some tahini sauce. Example 9 is based on quinoa. This is a star meal that also includes some wild chanterelle mushrooms, some kale, some chives, and some zucchini. And you can dress it, which is not shown here, with an almond sauce. This is where you would just cook the quinoa from dry and vegetables, chop them up to your liking, steam them, cook them gently, combine everything together, and you have your meal. Example 10 is also based on potatoes. It also includes some gently cooked asparagus and yellow peppers, all combined in a creamy cashew sauce. And so these are just 10 simple examples, but the combinations again are so many, as I like to say, really infinite. Because when you start picking and combining all the different grains, all the different starchy vegetables, the different vegetable combinations, mushroom combinations, and sauce combinations, you can see that you can eat literally a different meal every single day and never have to repeat the same thing while eating from the best foundation of foods for the human body. When you are making these meals, you may be wondering, can I make more of them and have them last for a few days? You definitely can, but do remember that for maximum and optimal nutrient integrity, it is best to eat foods fresh or as least processed as possible. This even goes for homemade foods. So whereas it's okay to cook a big pot of quinoa or a big pot of beans or even potatoes once a week and let's say have them last for a few days, it's not the same if you're going to combine all of these ingredients together and have them sit for a few days. Now, for about 24 hours is just fine. So this is a great way to cook your dinner, cook double, and then take the leftovers to work, perhaps as lunch the next day. And then you have an easy way to eat a healthy lunch at your workplace. If you're going to store the extras, of course, make sure they cool off accordingly and make sure that they get stored in a sealed container in the refrigerator. When it comes to freezing, what I recommend instead of freezing the whole star meal is instead freeze maybe some cooked quinoa. If you have, made a huge batch. Freeze maybe some cooked beans. But I wouldn't necessarily be freezing cooked vegetables, as now you have taken them from fresh to cooked to frozen, then you have to thaw them again, and it's just too many steps and too much loss of nutrients along the way. So always think as fresh as possible is best. And if you have to cook and store for many days, if you have to freeze, then think of freezing or storing the foods in their separate steps as much as possible. For more ideas of star meals, you can also visit my website evolvingwellness.com, where I have more images where you can scroll through various other combinations to get more motivation, inspiration, and apply it in your life. You can also check out other Healthitarian videos on healthitarian.com or on the YouTube channel, where there are some other meal ideas. And finally, you can also find an elaborate explanation of the different templates and their uses, as well as everything else on how to eat, what to eat, in my book, Healing and Prevention Through Nutrition. I hope you enjoy this resource and it makes your life when it comes to cooking homemade, whole food, plant-based meals so easy, so quick, and so practical. Thank you for joining me today, and until another episode.